For week one, we are covering the introduction of sociological theory, namely talking about what sociology is, what theory is, what sociological theory is, and what factors contributed to the rise of sociological theory. So first, I'm going to go over what sociology is, since I'm not entirely sure where you all are coming from in terms of whether sociology is your major or minor, and what other sociology classes you've taken. So sociology can be defined as the scientific study of human social life, groups, and societies with an emphasis on modern industrialized systems. And we'll talk about that emphasis on industrialized systems later on in the lecture. Sociology can also be defined as the scientific study of social behavior in human groups. And that's according to Schaeffer, who argues that sociology focuses on social relationships, how those relationships influence people's behavior, and how societies, which are the sum total of those relationships, develop and change. So theory can be defined as a system of generalized statements or propositions about phenomena, and there are two important features that distinguish scientific theories from other idea systems such as religion or philosophy. And those differences are that theories explain and predict the phenomena in question, and theories also produce testable and thus falsifiable hypotheses. So breaking this down a little bit, a theory can be considered a generalized statement that seeks to explain a phenomenon, and we might think of a synonym for theory as a model. So essentially, a theory examines patterns in data and tries to explain their existence. So when you are developing a theory, you might take a bunch of data, look and see what the patterns are in that data, and then try to produce a hypothesis that you can test with that data and see whether or not it's true or not, and you can develop your theory in accordance with that. So essentially, a theory predicts the causal relationships between variables or factors that can be tested against evidence. And a causal relationship essentially means that there is a cause and effect. So that is different from a correlation, which would just be a relationship between variables, where one variable may exist alongside another variable, but it doesn't necessarily cause that variable. Good theories also explain most or all phenomenon, and they do so over and over, and that occurs when we repeat an experiment. That being said, a theory that is shown to be false doesn't necessarily disprove it forever, and theories shouldn't be discarded if they're not 100% accurate. There can be exceptions, but a good theory should explain a phenomenon most of the time. So the difference between a general theory and a sociological theory is that a theory is just a statement of how and why specific facts are related, whereas a sociological theory attempts to explain the how and why of social behavior in the social world. So a theory can be applied to any aspect, any discipline. We can have biological theories, we can have theories of evolution, theories of astronomy, but narrowing it down to the topic of this class, sociological theory is really looking at theories developed in relation to the social world. So sociological theories share characteristics with theories that are developed in other branches of science, but there are some important differences between sociological theories and theories in fields like physics, chemistry, or biology. The first important difference is that sociological theories are generally more evaluative and critical than theories in the natural sciences. In other scientific fields, it's assumed that the pursuit of scientific knowledge must be free of value judgments, or in other words, that the foremost concern of science is to determine what is and not what ought to be. Some sociologists do adopt this model of inquiry, but in contemporary times, it's much more common for sociologists to also be interested in realizing a more just or equitable social order. So sociological theorizing sometimes falls short of the quote-unquote ideal science that's practiced more closely by disciplines in the natural sciences like biology, physics, or chemistry. And since sociologists often study inequalities in society, in addition to wanting to understand how society works, sociologists are typically also interested in learning how to reduce those inequalities. The second difference is that since societies change so rapidly, and since these changes are influenced by so many different factors, it can be difficult, if not impossible, to develop an all-encompassing theory that speaks to the entirety of the social world. So there were a number of forces behind the rise of sociological theory. Long before sociologists or philosophers existed, humans had developed ideas about what we know as society. We might even say that people have always been folk sociologists, in the sense that today many people make generalized statements about the causes of a social or political event, for example, economic turndown, or social conditions such as poverty. And early in human history, scholars began to develop schools of philosophical thought that contain elements of sociological analysis. But the emergence of sociology was the result of more than just a long history of humans thinking about the social world. It also reflected the culmination of broader social intellectual movements that included new ways of thinking, sometimes collectively called the Enlightenment because it brought Europe out of the Dark Ages. Many of the seeds of the debate regarding the nature of sociology were first planted in the Enlightenment, which was an intellectual revolution that occurred in Europe during the late 17th and early 18th centuries. During the Enlightenment, a number of long-standing ideas and beliefs on social life were turned upside down, and the Enlightenment featured the development of civil society, which were open spaces of debate relatively free from government control, and the rapid pace of the modern world, which together enabled a critical mass of literate citizens to think about the economic, political, and cultural conditions that shaped their society. The Enlightenment reflected not so much a fixed set of ideas, but a new attitude, or a new method of thought, or new ways of thinking. Some important points about the Enlightenment are that it was one of the most important aspects of this new attitude was an emphasis on reason. An emphasis on reason was closely linked to the rise of science. It involved a movement away from reliance on religious explanations for both natural phenomena, for example, a belief in the universe as divinely created, and social phenomena. The universe was seen as a mechanical system composed of matter in motion that obeyed natural laws. And these laws could be uncovered by means of science and empirical research. So the idea behind sociological theory was that conceptualizations about the nature of the universe were to be tested against observable facts. So the rise of science and empiricism, or the theory that knowledge comes only or mainly from sensory experiences, gave birth to sociology in the mid-19th century. The central idea behind the emerging discipline was that society could be the subject of scientific examination in the same way that biological organisms or physical properties of material objects were and are subject of scientific examination. The French intellectual Auguste Comte, who coined the term sociology in 1839, used the term social physics to refer to this new discipline and to his organic conceptualization of society. The term social physics reflects the Enlightenment view that the discipline of sociology parallels other natural sciences, and Comte argued that, like natural scientists, social scientists should rationally and scientifically uncover the laws of the social world. For Comte, the new science of society involved, first, the analysis of the central elements and functions of social systems, second, using concrete and comparative historical methods, and third, establishing testable generalizations about them. The Enlightenment was also involved with political and economic revolutions, and in fact the Enlightenment and the Counter-Enlightenment, which was a conservative reaction to the Enlightenment led by individuals such as Jean-Jacques Rousseau, were both the cause and the effect of a number of political and social developments which affected the newly emerging discipline of sociology. Tremendous economic, political, and religious transformations had been taking place throughout Europe since the 16th century, and the new discipline of sociology sought to explain the causes and effects of such social change. An example of this kind of change was the Industrial Revolution, which began in England in the 18th century. Some of the changes caused by the Industrial Revolution included large numbers of people moving from farms or agricultural work to wage work in factories located in rapidly growing cities. Factories transformed by the adoption of more efficient machines, leading to routinized tasks. For example, power loom in textile industry led to unskilled workers to produce 3.5 times as much as the best hand loom weaver. But the rise in efficiency also came with great human cost. Some examples of this were a reduction in the number of jobs available and technical skills needed for work in the factory, long work hours for low wages, and noisy, unsafe working conditions. For example, factories were dirty, poorly ventilated and lit, and dangerous.